This podcast contains strong language. Parental advisory is advised.
The Educational Physics Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Educational Physics Podcast. My name is João Figueiredo, and this is episode number 5. This time, I talked to Christopher Mansbridge. Christopher is a drummer and a teacher based in England, and Christopher and I got connected via Facebook, as you do. As we shared ideas and talked and exchanged thoughts on education and I guess other things, I came to appreciate Christopher's insight. For that reason, we agreed that we should talk via Skype, and I asked Christopher if he minded if I posted this online for people to listen to, and he said no. This podcast might be a little bit different than usual because Christopher actually has questions for me instead of, I guess, the other way around. So I had the chance to really talk about my personal life a little bit more, my professional life, and how I ended up doing what I do. Okay, so with no further ado, here's Christopher Mansbridge. Well, as you know, I'm gonna include this in my podcast because I think that anything that is worth talking about, it's worth listening. So, otherwise, why talk about it?
Yeah.
And so I would like you to, if you don't mind, introduce yourself a little bit so people know who you are and why they should listen to this.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm Chris Mansbridge. This year marks my 22nd year playing drums. I run a co-director of Rhythm Room Music School with Mr. Kev Hickman, who's also another great drummer, in Milton Keynes. So we've been open since the beginning of the year, and we've seen a massive intake of new students. I'm teaching about maybe 30, nearly pushing 35 students a week so far, and we're also running a bit like the Leeds Academy. We've just branched into new instruments, so we've got keyboard and guitar. And yeah, so as well as doing that, I am a touring musician. I've toured America, Europe, Russia. Music has taken me around the world. Seen records in the shops, and as well as that, some session work, some function band work, which obviously all little streams of revenues, all different things, my fingers in pies and things like that. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's me, I guess.
And that's good enough, man. It sounds like it sounds like a lot already.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So just to give context, usually, the first 4 episodes of this podcast, I've been doing the questioning, and then I just let people speak. Just as a side note, I was editing one of my podcasts the other day. I'm not going to say who it was because it might be inappropriate to share this. But I was looking at the sound waves of my side because I record two separate tracks, right? Your side and my side, so I can then mix it properly and whatnot.
Yeah.
And, I was fairly proud of myself because I can talk for days, right? And my sound wave was pretty clean, pretty empty. So I was pretty happy, I asked the questions and then I shut up. Today we might see the opposite. I hope I don't take over the conversation too much because I want to hear your thoughts on stuff, regardless what stuff is. We'll see where this conversation leads us. But yeah, I mean, like I was saying, just to give some context to everyone listening to this, the way we got to meet each other, virtually speaking, was via Facebook. And, I believe we exchanged a couple of ideas via comments, and then we messaged each other. And so that relationship started to develop, I guess, a sort of curiosity from both sides. And of course, this conversation is the result of that curiosity. I guess we have questions. And I'm going to have tons of questions because I'm a curious person by nature. But having said that, providing the appropriate context, I believe that you wanted to ask some questions. So I don't know what those questions are. I asked you privately not to tell me what they were because I like to be thrown under the bus. So, I'm all yours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, cool. I have just a handful of questions, obviously. Yeah, like you said, I've been following Leeds Academy as soon as you kind of started to pop up on the socials. So I found it quite interesting what you were doing and what you were saying. And it all I think, we need to share. It's beneficial for all of us. All schools, teachers need to share all these things. So, this is a great idea to have the podcast going. And yeah, in the meantime, I was just similar to some of the comments on your videos were just little questions. But, I guess my first question was, I've been toying with the idea of the reading, listening and watching circles. So if you imagine in your head like a diagram, you've got a circle, which is the reading, a circle, which is listening, and a circle, which is watching. And in the middle, they overlap, in this sort of purgatory area in the middle where, I like to think is a good place to be as a drummer, where you can watch, listen and read equally. But obviously you meet drummers, beginners or intermediate players or even professional players that are more heavily leaning to one area. So I just wanted to get your view on that idea of that thing existing and how you might guide students to be more central or someone that leans on one of those more heavily than the other that may benefit from moving into the middle a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great question, man. I mean, that's, I guess, a lifelong dilemma when it comes to how do you effectively and efficiently manage the balance between all those different elements. I think my approach to teaching that is that I have maybe two angles here that I can tackle this with. The first is that when I have a beginner student, their first lesson immediately has a strong engagement with the reading aspect of music. I think, and I swear that I didn't plan this, but I'm going to have to plug my upcoming book. Because I'll tell you why though. Because my upcoming book is all about the concept of not, I guess, the title is Hidden Teachings. And the point of it is to share tactics and ideas, concepts on how to effectively hide the teaching and just, focus on the learning, if you will. Right. So in a way, bypassing, or not showing the process as much as an actor is not supposed to be showing the acting. Otherwise, you just, if you see it, you know that that's a bad actor. You want to believe it. And that's, I believe that's something that a lot of teachers have, drifted away from. They are so, what's the word? Rigid with their teaching that they don't see a very flexible way of approaching concepts. So for example, the idea of reading and watching and listening. If you say you're teaching your first lesson and that's a complete beginner and you say, you know what? Okay, first lesson, I'm going to teach you a very simple rock groove, right? Just to get the coordination going and to make you feel that you can do this. Yeah. My first step is I go on the whiteboard and I write the rock groove down. That's it. There's no like, follow me, follow my, no, I don't do, actually one of my, I guess, one of my rules for myself though, is that I don't play,
So see if I can phrase this properly. I don't really play things for my students to copy me. I find that I've done that in the past because, that sounded perfectly reasonable. And then I started realizing that when I wasn't playing, they couldn't really conceive the idea of a sound. And so, of course, their practice by themselves suffered because they didn't have that crutch. So I started using a lot more visual input, being notes in this case, right? And I got them to sing the notes a lot more and to really internalize and develop the connection between the reading and the listening. So it becomes more of an internal self-development rather than, okay, I'll follow my teacher and hope for the best. So that's one of my approaches. I start straight away with using notes, right? So it becomes, in a way, a much more accessible angle because the students are not trying to decode that once they can play. I think that's the issue that sometimes we struggle with, because then the question, and this is going to be perhaps a topic that we're going to come back around. The question becomes, why should they learn how to read if they can play?
Yeah.
And that's effectively, I can't blame them for asking that question.
No, that's, I understand. It's interesting you were saying, the listening part, it's almost, so you're actually going straight to the whiteboard and you're introducing, quarter notes and eighth notes straight away. A similar thing, I kind of write the rock groove down, introduce this is how it looks. I might then play get them to play it, but then the listening aspect, I might put, another One Bites the Dust on or something, and you've just got that, boom, that, boom, that. So you're covering those three so they can see it, hear it, and see me doing it. It's interesting to see though which one they latch onto, because something will click more than the other with depending on how they work. That's cool.
Just to add to that, I mean that's definitely a very important point that you raised there, and it's worth talking about, even if just briefly, because yes, all students learn differently. Fortunately for us teachers, it's not like there's infinite ways of learning, but there are, unquestionably probably 4 to 5 ways. And I call them learning triggers, right? And you touched on that, right? Which approach they latch on to. And just to put it out there, I can tell that you already know that, but a lot of teachers don't know these things. And one of the, well, even before I say what categories those are, one of the things that is really harmful, and I'm going to say this because I was personally a victim of this as a student, is when teachers basically, they teach their past selves. So in other words, they teach the way they learn, and that's it. They don't even conceive that there's a second way. Because if I learn this way and you can't, obviously you're dumb, right? That's how they function, these teachers. Now, just to put a bow on that, those 4 to 5, I'm going to go with 4 categories just to simplify it. You have effectively the visual learners, and these are people who learn by watching you doing it, right? So they rely a little bit more on the teacher to actually perform, and not because they are going to absorb anything by osmosis, but they do process things a bit more visually. And then you have the oral learners, who are the guys you put a song on and they effectively seem to just grab it fairly quickly, or when they hear you play. So you see these people looking away from you quite a lot. And I've seen teachers reacting to that as if the student is distracted. And that's actually the opposite, right? The student is trying to focus because visual input is distracting. So they look away.
Yeah.
And then you have the read-write kind of student, and that would be me. That's my category. I need to write notes. I need to read notes. And I don't just mean musical notes. Like, if you look at any of my books, I pretty much write a second book inside the book. It's just, it's sick. I write a lot. I mean, it's just it's an urge that I have. Again, it's the way I learn. And then finally, there's the kinesthetic learners, and those people they basically take the average of all those inputs and then they need to do it. That's their click moment. It's when they sit down and do it and they ask you to, okay, stop talking, I need to play this. And that's, those are the 4 approaches that the teacher has a responsibility to explore all 4. And like you said, see which one the student latches onto the quickest, and that's it. And take a mental note of that. This is a student who learns X way, and that's the way it works.
Yeah. So, your angle is that you would stick with, they have this trigger point, but you would tailor your lessons to their way of learning, but you wouldn't say that they would benefit from maybe learning to read more if they're very listen based, or learn to listen more if they're more reading based.
Say, for example, you're talking about a student who's more of a listener, let's say. Now, that doesn't mean that student will never understand how to read or not even become an incredible sight reader. What it means is that's the trigger. That's what sets the reading in motion, actually. So they need to know what those notes sound like before they can even process what it is to read them. I'm, for example, the opposite. I don't really need to know what the notes sound like. I need to know what the notes are. I need to see them, because for me, that's how my brain is wired. When I see the notes, I can slow it down in my mind, and bam, then I can hear it. So it comes, in a reversed order, if you will. But it's just a trigger, though. All the other 4 approaches are still there. You still need to listen. If you are more of a reader like myself, you still need to listen. You still need to, you still need to do it. So eventually, everyone is a kinesthetic learner, right? At the end of the day. But what triggers the process is very important, especially if the student is not, if the student is not necessarily very, very motivated or doesn't have a lot of self-esteem, which happens a lot, then we definitely need to find a trigger. Because if we use the wrong route, let's call it, that's going to be a killer for the self-esteem of that student, because their brain is just going to go foggy and is going to assume that, I'm dumb, so I can't learn this.
Yeah, I do find it's sometimes really hard to students will wallow in, their own, just no self-belief, no, drive. And inspiring them on top of these things that we're doing is another thing as well. I just remember being a kid and being so excited about drums. I was lucky to be around live music when I was younger and just soaked it all in. But getting people out of that shell a bit and to really soak it in is another, really hard thing to try and almost teach, to put across to someone, in a way. And I think those things go hand in hand. You've got to be inspired to do all this stuff and see, how it actually, where does it all go? What's the point of all of it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if I can open up the book a little bit. I've always, I have a natural disposition to I guess, embrace depressive states. I do. I'm bipolar, so like I have a chemical imbalance in my brain, and where there should be serotonin coming down, there's, something else, right? My brain doesn't really know how to release the proper chemicals according to the situation. So I can easily mismanage emotionally, not rationally. I know exactly what I'm supposed to feel, but somehow it doesn't manifest itself. That's just to give context as to how I reacted to a lot of my, learning career, if you will. For me, it was always very important to know the why, because I had to rationalize everything. In other words, I couldn't really use, for instance, enthusiasm to justify going home to practice because it wasn't there. So I had to understand why I was supposed to go home to practice. And by why I don't mean because you're going to get good. That's bullshit. That's not going to work for me, because I'm someone told me this a long time ago. You're way too intelligent for your own good. So I knew that was most likely bullshit. Even at the age of 10, because you're going to get good. Okay. I'm not so sure about that, buddy. I need something a bit more realistic. I mean, for next month. Don't give me something for the near future that is just vague, right? So I had to do that myself, or to myself in a way, right? I had to start analyzing everything really carefully, breaking down the exercises, and really see the utility of everything. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but that's incredibly beneficial to me as a teacher these days. Because if I see someone who really has that lost stare, and I can tell, like, okay, they are completely clueless as to why they should be doing this, I know exactly how to tap into that, because I had to do that myself, because I had that stare as well. So it's something that is important to develop, that sort of to an extent it is to develop empathy, but at a deep level, at a level that and without sounding too heavy, but at a level that you have to allow yourself to be, to feel what your student is feeling, right? And really to go there with them. And if I've seen stuff, man, especially with adults. And I talk a lot about adult students in my upcoming book, because adults, they have a lot of shit going on, man. And sometimes that exercise that is not working is the feather on top of all the weights they are carrying, and everything comes crumbling down, and they just crash, right? And they just crash, man. And they crash for good. They just give up. I had more cases than I would like to admit, but it's just the truth, right? Of people who come here and, 2 months in and they give up, and I can see that it's pain. They are just in pain. They don't want to, they want to do something numbing, and that's not learning a musical instrument.
No, it's very much the case that it's so much harder to teach a mature student than it is a child of school age, because they're used to lesson plans and they're wide-eyed and they're like, what's next? What's next? Some of the older students, it feels like it's an escape for them, but they're not really sure where they're taking it. And I have to, almost explain to them, it's a way of life. It's a really positive thing when you let it in. Music is really positive. Without music, I don't really know what my life would be. I dread to think what it would be, but you have to kind of encourage them to let the music in and to be more of a positive influence on them, so they look forward to it a bit more. I think they feel like they should be doing something to keep themselves occupied, but they should enjoy it way more than they should.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, again, there's multiple angles to this. Perhaps I have a very peculiar approach to learning in myself. It's not like I necessarily impart this, on all my students. I don't necessarily go there with all my students. Once again, I guess it really depends on, ultimately, it really depends on you knowing who you're talking to, but I can share with you, I guess, an anecdote. Like with some of my students, I have a student here, I'm going to use a specific example. I have a student here, he's probably in his 40s, and I've known him like now for maybe 2 years, right? And I know that I can go really dark with this guy because I know he gets it. And when I say to him, like, look, when it's really sucking, and you start feeling like I'm a 40-something-year-old man, and for some reason I feel like just slapping this guy across the room, and then just give it all up. That's because you're really close to a breakthrough, right? And I say these things to some students because I know with them, they will relate, because like myself, I need to, like I said earlier, I need to rationalize what those weird emotions are. And and by rationalizing, I don't mean devaluing the emotional aspect of it, but translating rather. And a lot of us don't do that, and including teachers. But from a teacher-student relationship standpoint, it's really important that the teacher connects to that side of things.
Yeah, I think on the with some people, it's like we're walking on eggshells. You're scared of pushing buttons because you're not really sure how they're going to react. And then some other people are really, really open, and they'll come in and just tell you all about their life without even you asking. And then the door's already open for that dark humor or whatever that connection, I guess. But yeah, it's a thing that I'm learning more and more each time. The variety of people that come through and the way that you have to approach them is really interesting from psychological kind of way as well, which is what I found interesting about how you approach some of your students. I'm not going to say like a counselling session, but you kind of mix the drumming in with other stuff, but it's all relevant in a way. So I think that's quite important.
Yeah, I mean, I say that publicly, and I warn all my students, and I'm not even kidding, man. I warn all my students whenever they come in for the first lesson. I tell them, look, this is going to be crap most of the time, man. This is going to be horrible. It's going to take you like 10 years to even be pleased about your first fill. And if that's not the case, you're lying to yourself. Like, I really say this to these people, right? And they look at me like, what the fuck, man, this guy. But there's a level of realism to it. And of course, I don't say this to children. Although I do, but I rephrase that. But with, if they are 15 and older, yeah, I go full on. This is going to suck most of the time. And you can only be so lucky that one day you'll be happy about what you're doing. And that goes for anything, really. Anything that you're learning, that should be the approach. To go in thinking like, by next week I'm going to be a rock star is exactly why the state of education is all fucked up, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because we have this, immediate reward system happening these days, right? The trophy, the participation trophy system. No, man. No. As a parent, I can extrapolate this and leave drumming for a second. As a parent, if my kid goes to school and comes back with a trophy because he attended school, I'm going to take that trophy away from him and shove it up some teacher's ass. Because you're ruining my child. Like, don't do that. I spend a lot of energy trying to parent this kid, and now he comes home, getting prizes for being there. No, man. Right, and that's an issue that we as teachers need to be super careful about, and it's a difficult line to walk. I'm not gonna deny that. As a parent and as an educator, that's something that it needs to be managed. I'm being very open and very full disclosure now, but in the process of doing that, in the process of actually coaching a student through this, it's a lot more careful than this, right? It's a slower process. But I'm also a big believer that everything that's I'm a big believer in full disclosure. The way I address this now, I know it sounds extreme and radical because that's how I think about it. That doesn't mean that's how I act it out. It's the same way when I write my blogs. I know that some of my blogs and vlogs are slightly incendiary and they are dangerous sometimes, but it is what it is, man.
Yeah, I mean, why sugarcoat it? If it's offensive, that's another thing. But if it's just been realistic, then you have some students that will come in, they'll play like an Iron Maiden song. I want to play this. It's like, okay, well, there's 16ths on the hi hat there, and we can't do 8th notes yet. We've got a long way to go before we get here. But if you work hard at it, you can get there. And I don't think it really sinks in until, we're doing 16ths at 70 BPM. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to get to 130 now. And they go, right, okay, that's where it's all going. So, yeah, being strict and realistic, but without breaking people's dreams is the thin line in the middle. Yeah, it's hard because you want to inspire people, but you also don't want them to give up because you've almost in a way say you can't do this. You've got to show them how they can do it, and not just say a flat no. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, I agree with your point on that. I think it's a lot of cotton wool being put around students, and it's more of a harsher reality. And I think it's better to face that earlier on than hide it.
I agree, man. I mean, I've had situations here, not many to be honest, but it has happened that, man, I had to fire some students and be like, okay, this is not working. I've given you a year to sort yourself out. You're really not being cooperative. And I feel like it's becoming a little bit of a waste of time for both of us. And then, of course, there's an aftermath, which is the conflict with the parents, right? Because a parent never wants to admit that something went wrong. And again, I guess I can relate to that, although I will always do my very best to be a little bit more cold-headed than that and more rational. But the truth is, we have to motivate them, but we also need to sometimes be able to see like, okay, this is really not working. And it's not working because the student doesn't want to do it consciously. It's just because there's no interest, right? So there is no, you mentioned at the beginning, like you were always so passionate and excited about the drums. Well, if that's not there, right? What are we doing?
Yeah, it's sometimes I'll give them a listening list. You need to listen to this album. What do you think of this album? And then they've not listened to it. What have you been listening to this week? And they'll say nothing. I was trying to plug as much music into my head as I could when I was growing up, and that's where I've drawn all my inspiration from. I took the fills from that guy, the hi-hat work from that guy. I like the ride thing he's doing. There's much music as I could hear. I'm patching it all together in my head and regurgitating it as my own sound. I'm building it from there. But if don't have that musical intake, then how are you going to be a drummer? How are you going to be even interested in music if you're not listening to anything? I mean, I don't care if they come in and I've been listening to Justin Timberlake. Cool, that's great. We'll do that. But there's nothing there to work with sometimes, which is really frustrating.
Yeah, no, you would only be so lucky if they said Justin Timberlake, though. No, but I mean, I'll go farther than that, and perhaps even broader as well. And I'll try to expand on this, and you will feel me often zooming out away from drumming specifically. But I believe that the main and most important manifestation of passion is curiosity. And that's the best and easiest as well metric for a teacher to measure the student's engagement. For example, if I have a student, and like you said, no, but I'll go even simpler, I guess. Not simpler, but a less, what's the word? Demanding metric. If I have a student who's been playing drums for, say, 3 years, and it's a new student, but he's been playing drums for 3 years, and they come in for the first lesson with me, and I ask, all right, so who's your favorite drummer? Or give me 2 or 3 drummers that you appreciate. I don't know. Holy crap, we have a problem. And you know what? It shows. Because as soon as they start playing, they sound like they've been playing for 3 months, not 3 years. Because they have so little, the engine is so, the RPM is so low that how can I'm not saying that this is unfixable. It's very fixable, but how can I expect a student who has 0 reasons to drum really, and by reasons I mean in this case influences, but those were the reasons why I started playing, right? I mean, there were these drummers that I was just fascinated by and mind blown by. And that would intrigue me, like, how are they doing that? And that's how you delve into technique and you start exploring all that stuff. That for me was my, and most people's, path, right? Like I was fascinated by these people, these drummers, and that ignited my curiosity. Hence why I said the biggest and easiest metric to measure passion is curiosity. If you are passionate, you'll be curious. If you're not curious, it's a tough one.
Yeah, no, you have to be curious. I would watch these drummers. I would go, how has he set his kit up? Oh, what is that, a big ride? What cymbals he's playing? That's how he gets his sound. What's he doing with his foot there? It'd be all of these things, and everything about it. Just that's what's quite exciting when you get that student that's like, they'll ask you something about the kit, and I'm more than happy to talk about that for half an hour. How you can set your kit up, and they're actually listening to me, which is exciting. That's the watching thing, really, isn't it? It's the watching, because a lot of the technique that I've picked up is by watching how the drummer is just sitting there, how he's holding his sticks, his posture, everything about it was a lot, which has sort of inspired me to sit there and go, I need to copy this. I need to emulate that. And it was really exciting when someone comes in and goes, I heard this album. I'll go, okay, if you like that album, listen to this album. And then if you like that album, listen to this album. And they come back and go, I love that album. And like, there you go. There's the magic. Yeah,
that's it, man. And there's always a click moment. I mean, again, if there is curiosity, eventually that curiosity will click, right? And there's a dot in that map of data that keeps coming at you, especially in this day and age with the internet. It's just it's an ocean of data, but there's going to be a small pixel that suddenly your brain is going to just flare up. And that's when you have that click moment. Like, okay, I'm all in for life. And that for me was the click moment, came way before any passion for drumming. With my passion for learning, right? And I was saying this to someone the other day, like when people would ask me when I was a kid, right? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'd be very confused by the question because and my answer was always, I don't know, anything, because I knew I didn't have that kind of idealistic image of my future self, because I knew I could learn anything. And what I didn't know how to say, because for me that wasn't at the time a human category that I could understand, was because my answer would have been, I want to be a learner. I want to be a good student of life, of knowledge, and that's really what it is all about when it comes to teaching as well, is how to show them that they can learn anything. So, techniques are not an obstacle. Genres are not an obstacle. Speed is not an obstacle. What we need to focus on, what can be an obstacle, is not knowing how to learn those things.
Yeah. No, I think, that's a really good way to look at it. I think I was different in my youth. Drums for me were an escape. I didn't do badly at school. I was mildly dyslexic, and I had a lot of problems with maths and confidence issues because of that. But when I got up in front of assembly and did a drum solo, people that would I was invisible to a lot of people, and could say bullied in an aspect. It then gave me a platform, and I could do something that they couldn't do, and they absolutely loved it. And things completely changed from there. I said, right, I found what I can do now, and I'm good at it, and I like this feeling. I like to entertain people, and playing in assemblies, playing after school, in school concerts, whatever. I just completely fed off of it, and that's what really inspired me to carry on, and it kind of gave me the confidence. That boosted my confidence, and that led on to other things. Learning other things. It was kind of strung onto the back of the drums. But for me, it was a confidence thing. have that feeling of, I couldn't speak to 100 people in a room. I would go red and I would probably sweat my ass off, but I could play a drum solo for 10 minutes in front of them, and it didn't make sense really, but that's how it was. It's completely untouchable when I was behind the kit. All the kids left me alone after that.
I love it. I mean, it's so funny how we can all take on different routes to land in the same place, right? Like, because I still feel, I mean, I don't know, I might be exaggerating and being slightly self-deprecating now, but I still feel like it's easier for me I'll put it this way. Whenever someone asks me, like, just play something, I'm like, hell no. I don't want to do that. It's like asking the stand-up guy, like, tell me a joke. Like, no. And I've always kind of been like that. And it was hard work for me to play in front of people. Not necessarily due to massive anxiety or anything like that. But I always felt more pleasure out of talking about, and then of course I would play, but it was more in the context of explaining things. And then I could play for 10, 15 minutes. That's the irony of it, right? Now that I'm engaged, there's an actual tangible reason for me to be playing. Hey man, I'm all in. But the whole, play something for me a little bit was always very difficult for me, which is ironic how different routes can land in the same place. It's just interesting.
Yeah. That reminds me of a point I was going to talk about as well, of encouraging students to move into performing live, because I have a very small number of them that actually play with other musicians, and it boggles my mind. I don't know what your view is in it, but I kind of feel like it's the end game of playing your instrument. You could sit in your bedroom with your kit for the rest of your life, but you're not really getting the full thing, to perform live or play with other people. We're supposed to accompany musicians with the rhythm, and we learn so much more from playing with other musicians as well. But encouraging them to do it is sometimes really hard work. They just go, oh no, I can't do that. But I'm like, 4 weeks ago you couldn't play that beat, and we've already been playing along to, a simple song. But they can't see the connection between doing that and being on stage with a band. So I'm trying to find these ways to inspire people, put your name on a forum, go, I want to jam with some people. Even if you do it once and you don't speak to them again, it's still good, that side of things is almost missing for a lot of people. So I don't know what you think about, and obviously you've put your recent concert on, which is a really good opportunity for them. But do many of your students have bands? Are they playing, with friends or professionally?
Well, no, not. It's always a minority, but that's just going to be that's always going to be the case, right? When we have to look at these things using the Pareto rule, right? 20% of your students will do 80% of the fun stuff, and 80% of your students will be doing the other 20% of the fun stuff. So in other words, fun stuff meaning in this case playing live. So it's always going to be a minority doing the majority of the fun stuff. You'll have probably, I don't know, 20, 30 students in your lifetime who will actually become something.
Yeah.
That's just, it is what it is, right? But, now going back to your point, yes, they should play, live, because I really believe in, application, and I believe in putting things to the test. So yeah, we've been doing these concerts, twice a year, and this is, of course, an opportunity for all of them to do exactly that. They go out there and show exactly what they've learned. I have a very, let's say, heavy hand on what they're going to play. and I'm fully responsible for preparing them, including the students from the other instruments as well. I'm always present during rehearsals because I have a very, well, maybe I just have a very high standard for things. I don't want to go through the hassle of organizing and hosting a concert to seeing people not doing a good job, basically. So I really push these guys, right? And here's what's fun or interesting is that as I'm, and especially this last concert that happened quite a lot. I was working for the first time with these groups of people of multi-instruments, because as you know, we've only recently expanded and, took in different other instruments besides drums. So this was the first time that we had, let's call them bands, right? We had teachers of other instruments collaborating with drum students collaborating with guitar students. So there were all these sorts of, interesting, groupings. And I was in the room and I was saying like, all right, so, but the guitar is way too loud. You have to allow the vocals to do this. Oh, I didn't mean turn the volume down. I mean, you have to control your dynamics, right? So I was coaching them through how to actually operate themselves and maneuver themselves in the context of a band. And I was being hard on these guys, man. I was stopping the songs. Like they would start and 10 seconds in, I'd stop. I would like put my hand up and be like, no. What are you doing? Right? I was going hard on them. They were loving it. So much so that, by popular demand, I should say, we are starting a class that is basically how to play in a band. Because
that's a great idea.
Yeah, the students were in love with it. And these were the same students who were very scared of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you said the D word there, dynamics. Something I always say, dynamics. Drumming is dynamics. You've got to explore the dynamics. I think until you realize someone's making so much noise over you, or, it helps to help control it. You could smash your cymbals and the singer's going, what the hell are you doing? Just getting people in that room together and exploring how each other's instruments work together, but also not to tread on each other's toes it's invaluable, really, because that's what it's all about, and that's what's going to get you work. So that's a really good idea. I'm exploring a similar idea here.
Yeah, man, do that. I mean, I was resistant when it came to the idea of hosting the recitals. I'll tell you why, because I have a limit of people that I can manage at the same time in my mind. And I know that if I have 50 people in a room, I'm going to have to work, I'm going to have to do some work. It's not going to be fun. Let's put it that way for me. It's going to be work. That's something that for me is very unnatural. I'm an introvert. I don't really, it's very draining. It's very draining for me to do something like that. So I was fairly resistant, but we've done, I believe 4 now. And man, again, they're not fun for me personally, but they are very successful. Academically speaking, they're very successful because the students really, really work really hard to not look like fools. And that's always good.
Yeah, I think it's just putting your ass on the line, and once they do it and they realise they can do it, it then spurs them on to maybe form a band or anything. Yeah, that's right. Anything live. Yeah,
that's how it began for me, man. I mean, the second music school that I attended had an ensemble program, right? So I was playing with all these people, right? Fellow music students of other instruments. And we started making bands and getting together after music school and then doing some gigs. I was 16 or 17 by now, but still, that's how it really all began for me. I had been playing for a while, and I did, recitals and whatnot. But to be in a small room with people my age or whatever. The age is really irrelevant here, but just for the sake of argument, people my age who play other instruments who are at my level, and we are all then, being coached, because we had teachers in the room, of course, so this wasn't unguided, quite the opposite. That was really the key for me to then, go on to join countless bands after that. So yeah, it's really great stuff.
Yeah, it's a way of life. So that's why I can describe it. There are moments created by being on the road or playing shows that you can't recreate in any other way. That's as simple as I can put it, really. Yeah. Looking at my points here, you've pretty much answered most of them, which is great. The dynamics as well, teaching the dynamics and technique tend to go hand in hand with me as well. I don't know about yourself. Something I've got here, I'll just put the order of things, which I think from what I can remember is, I've been thinking a lot lately of how I structure the order of what we do. Say for a beginning drummer, complete blank canvas drummer, depending on how quickly they're picking things up or what, direction they're going, where I start to introduce things. So, starting off with quarter notes beats, the 8th notes beats, the 16th note beats. And then when am I going to introduce, opening the hi-hat, things like that. So I just wanted your take on maybe what you see as a logical path of the gateway to drums. You do this before that, before this, and what you think would work, what works best for you when on your approach.
Well, I think it's fairly easy to plan ahead the first 4 to 6 lessons. From then, I tend not to really plan anything, including I have and I say this publicly, and I say this to my students. I never plan a lesson, and there's a very specific reason for why I never plan a lesson ahead of time. I expect them to.
Yeah.
And I really make a point of reminding them that it's their job to plan their lessons. My job is to coach them through it. And that's exactly what we do. And my students quickly get, and that, by the way, I need to say this because this is a very important tool when it comes to, efficient education, is to pass the leadership role to the student. As soon as they feel, and our role is of coaching and mentoring, because as soon as the student feels that they own the path of learning and the process of learning, which they do, because ultimately if they decide not to learn, it doesn't matter how much you teach. If they decide to put the walls up, game over.
Yeah.
And I'm personally of the belief that we shouldn't be, we shouldn't be that professor kind of character, and they are a bunch of empty vessels, and we are just filling them up with knowledge, and they now go home and be, and be knowledgeable, which is how a lot of education works, right? You have the teacher above the students, and the students are down here just, trying to learn something, but the teacher is just talking at them. So you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I don't do is plan lessons. So I don't really plan lessons. However, what I do is that I'm constantly looking for issues in their playing, right? And that for me is how I because I approach things from a coaching perspective, right? So we have those 4-6 lessons pre-planned because that's pretty standard stuff, right? Like you said. You start by teaching them the quarter notes, and then I address subdivisions, and then, probably third lesson, I drift away from the notes and theory, and we tackle, simple stick control, singles, doubles, and paradiddles. I talk about the why behind all those 3 rudiments. I spend a long time doing the first, well, always, but the first 6 lessons, I really spend a long time on the why behind things. So if I'm teaching a student about doubles, I will address the physics of rebound. I will address velocity of movement. I will address distance, stick heights, if you will. I will address fulcrum pressure, and I'm very detailed about these things. And I personally, and I say this to them, I don't really care if they get everything that I'm saying, in the sense that it will click.
Yeah.
So I might as well just, again, for the sake of full disclosure, here's how it works, and I go all in, and then I let them experiment with it and actually see it, right? But eventually, things need to happen organically. Otherwise, we go into that, again, professorial kind of approach, and it doesn't really work.
No. I guess you've got to go in with the angle that they'll probably retain a small percentage of what you've done in the lesson. And then I remember, it's funny saying that, it's just reminded me when I was a student, when I was a lot younger. I remember a year later, I'd remember something that they said in the lesson. I'll go, that's what he was talking about.
That's right. I see it all the time. Yeah. And
yeah.
I just look at them sometimes and I give them the side smile because I've seen that so many times. I mean, I've been teaching now for close to 13 years, and it's so, almost in a good way, but predictable. I already know when the penny is about to drop. So, and by the way, as I guess a little tool for teachers out there, when you're about to see that penny drop, step aside. Don't force it. And usually this is a human psychology, I guess, trait, a human trait, if you will, because usually it's silence that really makes that penny drop and drop heavy. So when I'm guiding them through a process, whatever that might be, learning how to play doubles or understanding how to play a polyrhythm, doesn't matter what it is, simple, complex, easy, difficult. As soon as they are about to break through, I go quiet. Right? And I purposely go quiet for a long time. And I just look at them. And then suddenly you see it. Their eyes go open up and, the classic epiphany face. And I go like, because I felt in the past as I kept forcing, like, okay, you're almost there. You're almost there. That would actually clog up the system a little bit. And they would actually end up drifting away from the epiphany because I was so, out of excitement sometimes, but still wrong. I was so, what's the word? Intense sometimes with like, you're almost there, you're close, you're gonna get it. And they would be like, I don't think I can get it, right? They would back away from it. And now I ask a question, they give me an answer, and then I say something like, okay, so now listen to what you just said. And I go quiet. Because that last answer is just the last piece of the puzzle that they needed. And if they think a little bit, and it's important to teach our students to think about thinking, it's very important to do this. If they do that, they will develop 2 things. One, they will develop the confidence that they can get there. Because I didn't take them there anymore. That's what silence means in that situation. Is that now you are on your own and I trust you to get there. You don't need me anymore. And the second thing that they also learn from that experience of getting there by themselves is that thinking is key.
Yeah, self-discovery of the applying it to the kit. Yeah, great, perfect. Yeah. You've answered all my questions. Put it that way.
Well, it's 1 hour and 5 minutes, so I think
it's really flown by. That's all I've got. It's been really good.
It's my pleasure, man. I mean, so I'm gonna give you the floor to use the platform to plug anything you have going on, including Rhythm Room. You mentioned the school, but leave people a website, something that so I can also leave it in the description of the video.
Okay, yeah, our website is rhythmroom.co.uk. So yeah, that's our website. We've got the January rush in now, so that'll be me trying to squeeze lots and lots of students into a week. So that's my challenge arising, what I'm doing today. So nothing to plug. I don't have any books, but that's maybe I will one day. I'm definitely compiling things in a big folder that I like, and maybe I'll join the author club at some point. Who knows?
Hey man, it's I don't wish that to my worst enemy, by the way. It's a horrible cross to carry, man. It's no, in all seriousness, writing is it's of course as most things in life that are pleasurable, there's a big amount of pain that comes with it. I love the process of writing. I love to write. I'm gonna set it up by saying that I love to write. I wrote my first book in 2 weeks. I mean, I became obsessive about it, and that was that. Now, here's what happened. Writing is so grueling that after writing that first book in 2 weeks, I spent 15 months convincing myself that I should write a second book.
Straight away?
Yeah, but 15 months just convincing myself.
Right, okay.
Not writing it. Just saying, I have another book in my mind. Actually, okay, in all honesty, I have a list of books that I want to write, right? So I have maybe 7 or 8 titles or topics that I will be writing about in the next, say, 10 years, right? But man, writing it's very difficult because, yeah, it's very difficult. It takes a lot of attention. You can't just write for 15 minutes a day. That's not a thing. I tried that, but you lose track of your own plot easily if you do that. It's like practicing. It's like anything else, right? If you just sit down for 15 minutes a day, it's not going to get any good. You need to put in the time, and it's difficult to do that when you have, so much going on.
Yeah, I can imagine myself sitting there starting and then just not stopping for 3 hours because I need to get all this stuff out of my head onto the page, and then reading it the next day and going, what the hell? I need to move it all around, and then the next day not wanting to do any of it at all. It's just, it's discipline.
I mean, it's the same thing as anything else, right? It's discipline. One thing that I've learned over the years was that if you're writing, don't edit, because then you just if you're trying to edit yourself as you're writing, oh my god, you'll never get out of the first line. So I've managed so far to write roughly 90 pages of my second book. And I've committed myself to releasing the book in April. Yeah. So I have to write.
Yeah. No, I'm curious. I haven't read your first one yet, but I'll be checking that out. I think there's a going on. If it's anything like what you've been talking about today, I think it's beneficial to have it as a reference for certain points that you've made.
Yeah, the first book is called How Do We Learn? And it's a book on the science and, I guess, the craft of learning. So basically, the premises behind that book was to educate students. And then there's a side note there, because I ask teachers and parents to also read the book, because they can then reverse engineer how the students learn and teach better and parent better as well, right? Now, my second book is called Hidden Teachings, and this one is kind of, it's the B side of my first book. So now is where I'm addressing the science of teaching, and this one is, first of all, a lot thicker because my first book is like 60 pages long, and I was pushing it because I know the student's attention span is not that long. But this second one is a bit more. Has a bit more girth. It's going to take a little bit more brain cells to go through because it's got a lot of, it's got a lot of research to it, and it addresses a lot of case studies. So yeah, it's a bit more intensive on the sciencey side of things. But I hope that's going to be useful, and it's giving me quite some pleasure to write this second book, because I feel like this is my comfort zone, not in a overly comfortable way, but it's where I feel like this is where my truest voice can come out, because I am ultimately an educator. That's what I am. That's who I am, right? Everything else for me is just a tool to get there. That's the mission behind this podcast as well. You see, like I'm focused solely. I am focused solely. The mission statement behind this podcast is to talk about education in a way that it's not talked about, because most people are scared of being too honest when it comes to education. Because here's what I've realized. I've been involved in education for many years myself, but also I have a backstory that justifies this passion. My family, everyone in my family has been a teacher for the last 3 generations. This is what I do. This is what I see. This is what I've grown with, and surrounded by. And one thing that I was always very, curious about, and at the same time frustrated about, was that 90% of teachers were actually scared of teaching, meaning that they knew they had to, and it's getting worse, by the way. They knew that they had to please the student. They knew that they had to be liked, for example. And that's something that even in my first book, which is addressed at students. So I'm talking to students in that first book. And I say like straight up, I don't care about being liked. I care about you learning.
Yeah.
Like even if you go home hating me, hey bro, as long as you know how to play that paradiddle, we're all good.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I'm trying to put those messages out there because they are uncomfortable. And I guess I've taken on the responsibility of saying what a lot of people feel they don't have the permission to say, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I think you've got to be cruel to be kind sometimes, in a way. And I'm learning more about how to approach that, a range of ages and abilities. The game changes a little bit, but, encouraging practice and trying to tell someone that they really suck at that particular thing without stunting their passion is a skill in itself, I think.
I'm with you. It's allowing. The thing is this, and perhaps just to even close my spiel here, it's allowing the student, and by coaching them, but allowing the students to know that mistakes are unavoidable if they are trying to succeed. And the moment they understand that mistakes are just, the way I phrase it is this: mistakes are nothing but the footprints left behind on your way towards success.
Yeah,
you have to walk. You have to walk. And as you walk, you're going to leave footprints behind. You can't turn around and start smoothing the sand because you don't want to see footprints. No, dude, you have to keep walking, right? That's what I tell my students. Screw the mistakes. They will happen. They will happen. And you can only be so lucky that you make them quick, fast, and tons of them, right? Because if you're not failing fast, you're not learning fast enough either. Right? So you really want to get all those mistakes out of the way as quickly as possible. And that's something that seems to motivate the students to, all right, I get it. And they take a deep breath and they just go at it, which is what you want to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Taking a breath, I find, I had a drummer of, a drumming friend of mine, his teacher used to make him get up, walk around the drum kit and sit back down again every time he was mentally burning out a little bit. And it totally worked, little things like that, taking a breath or a pause for conversation, or, a great ways to break the lesson up. It can be really hard, example, someone who's struggling with how triplets sound, it could be, it's week 4 on triplets and it's just not happening. I get frustrated as well, having to explain the same thing 10 different ways, but then they get it. And then you say, well, there it is. You try and take a snapshot of yourself 4 weeks ago and you couldn't do any of this. So that's how it works, and keep going forward. And
it's important that they see themselves progress. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, just the variety of ways that people are learning is just really astounding, and the way that it clicks with the certain people. And I guess, yeah, a page I could probably take from your book definitely is being more brutal, not teaching a student just because they're paying you money, and really trying to sift through all the stuff to find out how they can find their way, those and recognizing the footsteps you were talking about there, all those mistakes. It's like I always say, don't stop. They'll play the beat and they'll get a bass drum wrong and they'll stop, and I say, if you do that when you're on stage, everyone's going to turn around and look at you. Keep playing the beat, keep the top half going, get the bass drum right next time. And then they'll stop again. I'm like, you stopped again. Don't stop. Keep going. Keep the momentum going. You can't stop,
Those exercises,
like that.
Yeah, those exercises are well, again, I think that's why the second book is important, because I address exactly what's happening in terms of neurological pathways whenever that happens and why that happens from a physiological standpoint. For example, I address why, 100% of students 90 seconds into learning a beat, and by learning I'm being very loose with the word here, but now they get it, air quotes, and they are playing it, and 90 seconds in they make a mistake. But the mistake that you what? Like you were just playing this fine. And there's a neurological reason for why that happens. So, but that would be another 2 hours of podcast. But just to summarize it, there's a transferring of information in the brain that is trying to reallocate that newly absorbed information towards where it should be. In other words, your prefrontal cortex is trying to understand the beat, whilst your brain is saying, get out of here, because I need the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala to be working towards me not dying.
Yeah.
So it's trying to send that information away. Our brains are great at learning things that are useful. The issue is that we don't see the use in learning a rock groove. And I can't blame the brain for doing that.
Yeah. No, I definitely noticed some patterns. I find there's a dip. They'll get it, and then they'll unlearn it for about 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm like, and they're like, where's it gone? And I'm like, wait, it'll come back. And surely another couple of minutes later, they're playing it again. But there's a definite pattern there where it goes in and then it's just lost, and then it comes back. It's quite unusual to see, but definitely a pattern that I've recognized.
Yeah, that pattern, you will see that forever in all humans, because what happens is that your brain is trying to go into the memory bank and find some relatable information that helps them support that new information, right? So for example, this is why students struggle with moving just the one note in a drum beat.
Yeah.
because they get it. So the prefrontal cortex gets it, and it makes total sense. They dictate the drum beat correctly, because I always ask my students to break it all down verbally first, and they get it. Everything is correct. They absorb the information correctly. They are reading the notes correctly. Let's play this, right? And then what happens is that the brain, and this is all at a subconscious level, the brain goes into the memory bank to find information that is relatable. What it finds is not that exercise, but something similar, which is why they usually start playing something else, even though they just described the rhythm correctly. It's just like pronouncing I'm a foreign speaker, right? So whenever I saw a word that I couldn't, I guess relate to, I would not pronounce it correctly. Because my brain would try to grab something, right? Go in the memory bank and grab something more relatable. And unfortunately, there was nothing there because it was complete new information. And that's a process that is a little bit longer. But if we as teachers know how to also, well, first of all, if we know that that's a thing, it's a lot easier for us to then help the students avoid the dips, because it's then possible to avoid the dip. It's still going to happen, but there are ways to then trick the brain into not going into the memory bank.
Right.
And stay more engaged with the prefrontal cortex instead of trying to base itself in the ganglia, which is where we retain memories and sounds and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing, man. That's the thing about the second book, is really giving the teachers these tools that a lot of us don't have. Right. And I had to learn them myself. I mean, as we all do, but I guess I just have a curiosity as to how the brain learns. And that led me down that route of really learning, physically speaking and physiologically speaking, how the brain learns. But I can relate to it, because of the language aspect. The way I learned, I speak 4 languages. The way I learned all those languages was the same way. And I learned them by knowing, let me see if I can phrase this in a simple and concise way. I learned all those languages by refusing to use Portuguese, which is my mother tongue, as my frame of work.
Yeah.
Because that's the problem with most people. They always try to relate back to what they are most familiar with. And then, that's why, well, so many people struggle speaking foreign languages.
Yeah. Oh, hey, drumming's the 5th language.
It is indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is. It really is.
It's a lot of languages. It's a lot, man.
It's it's a lot of time. I've been on this earth for a while, man. So
yeah. No.
But yeah, man. I mean, I think that we need to, as teachers, I really think that we need to engage in conversations like these more often. I still believe, I gotta say that before I go on to say what I was gonna say, the willingness that most, well, actually all educators that I've spoken to and that I've invited to be on the podcast in the future, to participate in these conversations and this kind of open discourse and, no rules, no mask. Everything is allowed. I don't have a policy when it comes to what you can say or can't say. I really don't care. I would hope that everyone says whatever the hell they want. And, really, to the point of disagreement. I mean, hey man, let's go. I'm all in with that. Because I really believe that in debate, there's truth, somewhere in the middle between two opposing ideas, somewhere there lies what it is, not just what we perceive it to be. But education is no different. And we can only know that, though, if we do expose ourselves to, being not only, a conversation like this, which was basically an exchange of ideas, but my latest podcast that I released yesterday, it had a moment there, man. It had a moment where we went a little bit. Let's just say that, well, we didn't agree on a specific topic.
It was a heated discussion.
It didn't get heated per se, but no, it didn't get heated. But that's the thing.
I'm gonna have to listen to it.
Yeah, no, there's nothing bad happened, but we had to. I guess the best way to put it would be that we had to expose ourselves and our thinking to each other's perception, and that led to both of us, I believe. That led us to us. I guess we found ourselves scratching our heads and try to understand exactly why we were disagreeing, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, I believe, right? And especially when people know how to debate, which was the case. No one lost their temper, no one became emotional. We were just exposing, because I will admit, I will not entertain. I don't have patience for emotional debate. I find it boring, really. But in this context, I mean, this is what educators should be doing, I believe. Talk about their ideas, exchange ideas, see where the pitfalls of their own approach are.
I think that's it. I think you'll hit a few walls, especially with maybe some more veteran teachers who will be scared that everything that they know is not necessarily right, or that there is a better way, and you'll hit that stubbornness with people who are almost scared of what you're saying because they're like, oh crap, he's right, and it would completely turn their world upside down. And there are better ways to teach people, and there's, but it's like personalities, isn't it? Your teaching is very much your personality and, the way you put yourself across. But we can always change things. I think there's more people now that want to learn drums than ever before. So I think it's important to look at it.
Yes, absolutely.
Honestly.
Yes, we have the responsibility to do a good job by all these people. I mean, we have to do good by them. Otherwise, I mean, so what the fuck is the point?
Yeah.
That's what I've got, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you for asking me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah,
it's big names on the list, so it's a real pleasure to be asked.
The pleasure is all mine, man. I mean, I know it takes, I told you yesterday, it takes patience to hear me ramble for 10 to 15 minutes at a time, because I know I can go on these long tangents and then I sidetrack myself and somehow manage to come back. But it is what it is, man. Yeah, I mean,
all good. It's all relevant.
I hope so.
It is.
Cool, man. So enjoy your day. I'm gonna go warm up because I'm teaching today.
Cool. Okay. Well, have a great day.
You too, man.
I shall speak to you soon.
Take care, buddy.
All right. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
The Educational Physics Podcast.
If you would like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, and also consider the idea of supporting us via our Patreon account, which is patreon.com/Leeds Music Academy. My name is João Figueiredo, and thank you for listening and learn something today. Take care.